Welcome to Eggs and Issues, a monthly business program presented by the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. Eggs and Issues is supported by presenting sponsors Bank of America and Martins Point Healthcare, in cooperation with Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, First Light Fiber and Wex. Reception sponsors Key Bank, Clark Insurance, and Veryl Dana. Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs sponsors AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing Center. Community Corner sponsored Baker Newman Noise. Parking is provided by Sevi and Mayer Engineers. Our exclusive radio sponsor, WGAN. Listen weekday mornings to Ken and Matt on the WGAN Morning News. Print sponsor, The Forecaster. TV sponsor, WMTW. And e-media sponsor, Maine Biz. And now, please welcome Portland Community Chamber of Commerce President, Jack Lufkin.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We have a fantastic program, so I'm going to try to move pretty quickly through this agenda that you always have to sit through. So thank you. Welcome. As stated, my name is Jack Lufkin. I'm the volunteer president of the Portland Community Chamber of Commerce. The first thing I'd like to do is just a recap over the elections last week. It's no surprise to anybody what happened, but just a couple of thoughts there. Question one was defeated rather soundly, the universal home care referendum. That's something that is no surprise. The Portland Regional Chamber was very strong in its advocacy against that proposal, specifically the way it was crafted. However, we just do want to make sure that you're aware that Portland is still looking at their own specific referendum. And we've talked ad nauseum about the repercussions that could potentially have. We believe firmly that complicated policy like that, whether at the local level or at the state level, should not be decided by a referendum. You may have seen that the Maine People's Alliance had been collecting signatures at the polls, so that may be coming to a referendum in the future. It may be something that they endorse or try to get through the legislative policy. So do stay up to date with that. As it relates to the Portland City ordinance, we think it's time that we take a pause, and we do have a letter that we have drafted that 35 businesses have signed on to opposing the city's rendition of earned paid sick leave. And there'll be more information coming to you. If you're a business that wants to sign on to that letter, we'd be happy to have your endorsement as well. So on to different kind of news. We're very pleased that questions 4 and 5, which will provide much needed funding to both the University of Maine system as well as the Maine Community College system. A large they passed. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that. A large portion of these bonds will directly affect the University of Southern Maine and Southern Maine Community College right here in our communities. They are going to have a positive effect on the workforce needs across the state, and particularly in our region, by providing the needed education, skills, and training to set our students up for future success. And I'm sure one of our panelists today, Ed Cervone, is going to elaborate more on that. So also in Portland, there are 3 city council races. We're pleased to say that Councilor Nick Mavadonis, Belinda Ray, and Spencer Thibodeau were all reelected to the council. And joining us also here this morning is Councilor Justin Costa, and we want to thank all of the folks that serve on our Portland City Council and dedicate so much of their time and energy to making Portland a fantastic city. So welcome and congratulations. So I promise to be brief. I usually fail at that, but so rather than go through all of the events that are happening at the Chamber, and there's a lot around all of our 7-member communities, we have these cards on your table which talk about all of the different events that are happening around, and actually there's a QR code on the back, and if you want to sign up for any of those, you're welcome to do so. The only one I will mention is January 30th at Brick South at Thompson's Point is our annual event, and that promises to be a phenomenal event where we're going to talk about the growth and prosperity of the Portland region. So please do sign up for that. Moving on, I would like to always recognize our newest and renewing chamber members, and the following organizations have joined or renewed in the past month. Very quickly, we have O'Hare Associates, Partners Realty, Play It Again Sports, Breakthrough Sales Solutions, Portland Society for Architecture, 16 Green, Portland Beer Hub, Bondico, Antoine's Formal Wear, Conbeat Santa, Coffee by Design, Welcome Wagon, Grove Collaborative, Chris Daughtry, State Farm Agency, Julie Moulton, Coastal Lawn Care, and New England Specialty Stone. We welcome you to the Chamber and look forward to working with you. How about a round of applause? So we would always like to thank our special community partners, Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Spectrum Healthcare, University of Southern Maine, and the Southern Maine Community College. AAA Northern New England and Springborn Staffing provide our support for our Tomorrow's Leaders and Entrepreneurs program, which allow area high school and college students to attend Eggs and Issues. With us today, we have students from Gorham High School, Westbrook High School, as well as students from the University of Southern Maine and Southern Maine Community College. If you are here representing those locations, please stand and let us congratulate you. Thank you. We're very proud that the Portland Public Library is our FMI sponsor, who will provide additional information regarding today's topic after this event. You'll receive an email about that later in the week. Baker Newman and Noyes sponsors our Community Corner program. And today's Community Corner is an organization that is probably very familiar to many of you in the audience. And if not immediately familiar, you're certainly familiar with what they do. Today's Community Corner is Creative Portland. This is a quasi-municipal organization. Creative Portland is the city's official nonprofit arts agency. Creative Portland's mission is to support the creative economy through the arts by providing essential resources, by fostering partnerships, and by promoting Portland's artistic talents and cultural assets, of which there are many, many. As the official nonprofit arts agency, they support economic development efforts by strengthening and stimulating our workforce, creative industries, and enterprises. Beyond lobsters and lighthouses, Creative Portland produced this 1-minute sizzle reel to highlight the vibrant cultural life of Portland and to attract arts engagement and to promote the creative economy. Please take a look. Joining us today, we have Dinah Minot, the Executive Director of Creative Portland, Emily Southard, the Program Assistant, Colin Campbell, Volunteer, and David Brenneman, the Board President. Thank you very much for being here today. If anyone has questions about Creative Portland and what they do, they will be here afterwards to answer any questions that you may have. So, now, on to today's presentation. It is no secret that Maine faces a critical workforce shortage. Educating, training, recruiting, and hiring to fill Maine's workforce needs will be a top priority moving forward to keep the state vibrant and growing. Whether it's making sure our in-state students have access to higher education and training, or even reminding out-of-state Mainers that, yes, there are jobs and opportunities here, to securing economic avenues that will form the future backbone of Maine's economy. There are challenges ahead of us. With our three panelists today, we'll be discussing some of those challenges and some of the opportunities that we have here in the Portland region when it comes to building Maine's future workforce. With that, I would like to welcome our three panelists to come join me on the stage. We have Ed Cervone, Executive Director of Educate Maine, Kim Hamilton, the President of Focus Maine, and Nate Wiles, the Engagement Director for live and work in Maine. The panelists will each introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organizations. I will just note that at the conclusion of their prepared remarks, there will be a question and answer period. We do have microphones around the room. We would just ask that you come up to the microphone, state your name, an organization if you're representing one, and ask your question, and they will do their best to answer that. So today, I believe we are going to start with Nate. So Nate, take it away, sir.
Just kidding, we're starting with Kim.
And we're starting with Kim. Kim,
Yeah,
take
sure.
it away.
Good morning, everyone. I need to start every morning with some drum beats. That was awesome. Thank you very much for that. I'm Kim Hamilton. I'm the new president of Focus Maine. Many of you know Focus Maine's goal is to create 20,000 new jobs over the next 10 years in the areas of biopharmaceuticals, agriculture, and aquaculture. So this is an issue we really wanted to dig into. I want to thank you for coming out on a cold morning, too. I wasn't sure when I woke up this morning what the turnout would be. So obviously, this is an issue that's really important to folks. I'll also share that this is my inaugural Eggs and Issues breakfast, and I couldn't be happier to be not up here alone and to be sharing the panel with Ed and Nate. I'm also a demographer by training and have spent a lot of time thinking about these issues from an intellectual point of view, and it's really different to be sitting in the middle of an issue in a state that's really struggling so hard to turn this around. So I'm really excited to talk about this today. There's a reason we're all on this stage here together today. The workforce challenges faced by Maine can't be solved by any single organization. And so our three organizations are working together in kind of a concerted effort, a dedicated partnership to really turn the trajectory of jobs around here in Maine. And we thought today that we would spend some time just visiting with you, talking about what we're up to, sharing a little bit more about our organizations, and hearing from you. And we want to thank the Chamber for the opportunity to do that. So on the next slide, before jumping in, I just wanted to put this conversation in context. The data, I think, is really well publicized, but I wanted to make sure that we were really kind of grounded in the same starting point. The size of Maine's labor force is about what it was 8 years ago, but our employment rate has increased by about 7%. We all know the Maine population is shrinking. With no change, we'll have about 30,000 fewer Mainers in the next 25 years. Our median age is about 46, and if you compare that to the youngest state in the country, which is Utah, their median age is about 31. So we've got some big challenges ahead. And related to that, while the unemployment rate is quite low, what that masks are, more than 20,000 Mainers who have been out of the workforce for a long time are working perhaps part-time jobs or are unemployed. And so many of these folks aren't counted in the numbers that we look at. So there's a real opportunity there. The last thing I wanted to say is, our experience is certainly dramatic, but we're not alone. So if you consider industrialized countries facing similar challenges like Germany, Japan, France, there are some interesting things going on in those countries. Similarly, if you look across the United States, many, and Nate will talk about this today, are really doing some aggressive campaigns to reach out to newcomers. And we also see states really organizing around immigrant communities to recognize the talent and the credentials that those communities bring, and certainly that's an opportunity for us. So what this means is that there are many models to learn from. It also means that the competition for talent is not just within Maine, it's national and global, and Maine is competing, and we'll hear about this from Nate, with many other states that have really developed coordinated, well-funded, hard-hitting campaigns to win the hearts and minds of newcomers. We think these states may have some first mover advantages, but honestly, the reason we're here today is because we think that we also have assets, knowledge, and a growing commitment to really lean into this, and we're excited to talk about what those opportunities are today. And I think if we have a question at all about whether Maine can do it, it's been asked and answered, because if you look at the commitment around turning Maine into vacation land, which then brought in more than 36 million people each year as tourists, it's exciting to think about, okay, what's the next vision that can have that same kind of results? Lastly, before I turn this over to Nate, I would simply say conceptually, I find it helpful to think about the numbers of folks that we need to sustain the economy, as well as the skills that we need to really compete globally for attracting new folks here in this state. So that's been a helpful, just conceptual framework, and you'll see that played out in our presentation today. So finally, what we hope you take away from this today is that we think this is a solvable problem. It's going to take a full court press, however, and we're really excited to engage you in this conversation. So with that, Nate, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. So first thing let's talk about is Michigan. So let's all pack our bags and move. No, we put this up here as an example of, to illustrate the kinds of competition we're facing. So Pure Michigan, I'll give you two brief examples. One is, if you haven't seen these Pure Michigan ads, you probably haven't been on the internet in the last 5 or 10 years. These ads are compelling, they're comprehensive, and they work. They've spent tens, if not total hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising, not just to individuals, but also to businesses and also to tourists. This is one umbrella brand. This is one umbrella advertising campaign. What the takeaway from this should be is that we have some catching up to do. And so it's not good enough to sort of throw our hat in the ring and see what happens. We have to be the best to win. And so we are very optimistic, and the reason we're doing this, the reason these organizations, our 3 organizations exist to begin with, is that, as Kim alluded to, this is a solvable problem, and that we've got a really good product. In fact, we've got a world-class product, and that product is Maine's quality of life. And so we'll talk more about how that plays through. But the good news is that a great campaign for a lesser product than Maine in Michigan works. So when you start with a better product, the marketing challenges ahead of us are very solvable. There's some very smart people that we can leverage to take advantage of that. Ed?
So to why we all work together and what the impetus of this is there's a lot of talent in this room and a lot of our colleagues and friends. We don't need to necessarily create anything new. We don't necessarily need to take another angle at the study. We know the answers. We know many of the solutions. We know many of the strategies we need to involve. The question is, how are we working together? And I know the 3 of us, we're looking at this in ways of a level of frustration in terms of we're giving it all we can give, and things aren't moving at a scale that we need to move at. And so it really gave us pause to look at what could we do differently, and it's all partnerships. And I don't mean, going to meetings together, going to conferences together, chatting on the phone from time to time. It's thinking substantively is, how do we combine? How do we do this together? And the 3 of us, as just one example, have found ways to do this. And really it's about joint accountability. We have some goals. And we believe that we know we can get there together faster and better than alone. And we have joint accountability. Alignment. We have unique missions. We have unique products. But how do they align in a better way to get the outcomes we want? And some common goals. We're all working and spinning our wheels, but if we got a different goalpost, we can expect more of the same. So we have common goals or common understanding of where we need to get. So those 3 together have really defined a more functional, a more productive partnership. Most importantly, we have a common client. That's Maine businesses. Each of our organizations, a defining characteristic is it's private sector led. We work in the nonprofit sectors. We work in the for-profit sectors. We work with an array of people out there, and many of you. But what's defining among all of us is a lot of our mission, or most of our mission, is driven by employers in the state, for-profit, nonprofit, large and small. And so when you think about all that, who the client is, what they need, and what we can do, we've been able to leverage our strengths. We're looking at both the near term, because we keep saying the pending problem. It's no longer pending. It's like 2-3 years past. So we're in the midst of it, and we need to deal with that, but we also need to keep a view on the mid and long range game. What are we doing systematically around the state, within Portland, within our different regions, so that we can continue to grow and succeed going forward? So what we thought we would do is give you a few examples from each of our organizations of what that looks like and what that might mean to you in terms of action. And please note that we took a highlight reel here. There's a lot going on, almost too much in some of our days, and it would take too many eggs and issues to get there.
And unfortunately, we don't have a drum beat.
We don't have a drum beat.
Go to this through.
It's hard to follow that video. That's
Really
pretty
is.
cool. So we want to get into that. So I'm going to start. Many of you, I'm assuming many of you know who we are. I tell my board you do. Educate Maine, and I'm the executive director. We are an organization of 6 people. I have 2 staff actually in the back, Jason Judd and Catherine Johnson, who are here from my staff. But we are a business-led education advocacy group. We have a very simple mission. We work to prepare Mainers for continued learning and for promising careers in this state. We measure that through attainment, meaning we believe education and training is the economic development strategy to produce a globally competitive workforce. And we measure that by the skills you get. It is no longer sufficient to just get a high school diploma and expect to succeed in this economy that changes. You need something in addition to that. That could be a skilled trade. That could be a professional or technical certification. It could be a college degree, and Maine needs them all. Maine employers need them all. The common denominator is that it ties you to a job in this economy and allows you to have a quality of life sustainability that you expect. We do this and we feel the niche we play, and that's why we play so well with my 2 partners here, is we believe that these solutions are solved by partnerships with business and educators together, thinking collectively about what are our common issues. So just a few things that we do. One of our immediate need programs and long-term is about training our educators and giving them information to help be better mentors and better counselors. We often think of guidance counselors, they're critically important, but if you think about educators, they're the people who are talking to kids and young adults day in, day out. We expect a lot from them in terms of being able to guide and to deliver a product, but we have a responsibility. Maine businesses have a responsibility to provide information to them to inform that. So we have a group called Education Leaders. For those of you who've been in Leadership Maine through MDF, we modeled this 6 years ago off of that, which was a Leadership Maine at a price point that educators could afford. And we take you across the state once a month for 10 months, and we take you to a different region. We introduce you to CEOs and businesses to educate you about the Maine economy, about the opportunities that are in the state that many kids do not hear about. And those educators go back to their districts, back to their campuses, and share that information and become better ambassadors of Maine. Likewise, businesses come better grounded in what educators are facing day to day, forming a partnership to solve that problem. Another piece that we have, many of you are familiar, and again, my 2 staff in the back are leading this charge, Project Login. Project Login got started as a partnership between Maine businesses and the university system to really say, how can we get more people graduated with computing and IT skills into jobs in demand? Over time, it's evolved and our learning has evolved. It's no longer purely about degrees, it's about skills. And that can be through degrees, through finite learning experience, certifications, or whatnot. But Maine employers are leading the charge in that, in terms of defining what they need, working with our institutions. USM is an excellent example, as is SMCC in Portland, in terms of being lead partners in this. But what our learning has showed us, and what we've heard from, in particular, the chancellor, was we're doing all we can do right now. You need to give us more supply. We need more people coming up through that workforce and education pipeline who are interested in that. So a great initiative we have going on now with our national partner, Code.org, and our main partner, Maine Math and Science Alliance, is to bring computer science to every school district in this state. Currently, 30% of districts have what you would call computer science, meaning 70% have no option for their kids. And what that looks like is a partnership with our partners, our main businesses, along with educators, that are delivering curriculum and ongoing professional development to teachers in these schools to build these computer science programs, connecting them to you, Maine employers, so that they have higher aspirations and aptitude when they get to that point of their life where they're going to engage in the career. And finally, my piece is around Maine Spark. And some of you may have heard this. Maine Spark really came about from partnerships like this. We're working better together, we're getting better outcomes, but we need to scale this up. Maine Spark is a campaign. It's not a program. It's not an entity. It's a campaign. It's a campaign that really says, how can we scale up this partnership alignment, common goals, common accountability in terms of driving the workforce? Maine Spark set a goal that by 2025, the Maine workforce needs to have 60% of its workers with some kind of credential of value in addition to their high school degree that connects them to a job. Currently, we're at 44%. We're actually making some good ground, but we have a ways to go. But these partnerships like this help inform that. So now we're looking at over 80 organizations working together, much in the same way we've described, towards our common goal and our common need, which is building that workforce to drive a globally competitive economy. So next you'll hear from Kim and Nate more about what their organizations are doing as well. Kim.
I wanted to just share a little bit more about the work of Focus Maine. As I said earlier, we're really focused on growing jobs in 3 sectors: agriculture, aquaculture, and biopharmaceuticals. And we're really leaning into growth-oriented companies that want to sell more of their goods and services outside of the state of Maine. And we've been focused, in our first year around kind of the technical support to provide these businesses. And we're really now kind of looking at the other side of the coin, which is what are the human capital issues that we need to address to help these businesses grow. So I wanted to touch on just 3 activities that we're doing, some in partnership with my colleagues on this stage. The first one is our internship program. It's called the Focus Maine Internship Experience. Many of you participate in this program. This year we had 410 interns from 29 different companies participating in this. Our partner is Educate Maine, and Jason, who's here, and the team have been tremendous in helping us execute on this. Basically, we provide an umbrella experience over the internship programs that exist here that each of you may be running in your own companies. And our goal is to help young people see beyond the individual company they're working in, to see what the other opportunities are, for a pretty simple reason. We know about 60% of interns turn into full-time employees. So it's a really high leverage investment for companies to participate in. The other thing we do is provide some professional training. And we also want to get young people excited about being in Maine. So not only are we creating stickiness around kind of the opportunities in the workforce, we want them to understand, all the exciting social and cultural and outdoor activities that are here in Maine, to Nate's point about the great product that Maine has. So this has been tremendous, and we think next year we will grow even further. We're in the greater Portland area, a little bit in Midcoast and Bangor this year, and hoping to take that even beyond next year. The next effort I want to highlight is something we're doing with Live and Work in Maine. We've just signed a partnership with LinkedIn. Many of you may not know, I didn't, that LinkedIn works with a lot of states and communities around the country around economic development. And there are about 120,000 Mainers on LinkedIn who are not in Maine but have some connection to the state. So we think this is a really great testing ground to try to understand how can we reach them with more customized, curated messages to get them more excited about pursuing opportunities here. And this is where Live and Work comes in. We've been working closely with Nate to help develop that content, to segment that population of 120,000 and to understand what resonates and how with whom. I don't have results to share with you yet, but we will soon, and we think this is going to be a great platform for all of the employers who are looking to recruit to Maine. And then the last piece is to touch on the core work of Focus Maine. We're doing a couple of things around understanding the skills gaps and needs in our particular industries. So for example, in the aquaculture space, we're working with GMRI to understand, what does industry need now? What are the pain points, and what are those going to look like going forward? So we're interviewing industry right now in aquaculture. We're also really curious about what does a mature aquaculture country look like. So we're trying to understand in a place like Norway or Scotland, what are the kinds of training and pipeline building programs they have? Could we actually adopt or adapt some of those and essentially leapfrog in our own training capabilities? And then in the biopharma space, we're in active conversations right now with biopharma companies that are interested in potentially locating or having some part of their business here in Maine. And as part of that, workforce is coming up in spades as a really big issue that they need to, that they care about. And so we'll have a much better insight on what that looks like and how to structure shared training programs with them. And then lastly on agriculture, this has really led us into some important conversations around retention in the food industry. So we're looking at what kinds of tools can we provide to HR managers in that space to help them retain employees. And we're also focused in particular in the food processing space going forward on what the skills gaps and needs are in that, because we know if we can capture more value around food in the state, that's good for job growth. So we're very interested in food processing capabilities. So that's just a snapshot of the work that we're doing, but very happy to talk more during Q&A.
Awesome. All right, so live and work in Maine. Two examples of what we do. So the first is we're engaged in tactical marketing. So what does that mean? We've got 4 target audiences of people that we're looking to engage that we've identified and we've validated are interested in and are the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, of talent that we could bring either to retain in Maine or to attract to Maine to help solve this workforce problem. The first is industries of potential. So I won't speak any more on that for the sake of time. You heard a little bit about what that looks like through our partnership with Focus Maine. The second is college students and recent grads. So looking at not just retaining a higher percentage of folks who are here in Maine, but there's a softer side to that as well, which is the fact that we don't want 100% of Maine College and University graduates to stay here. If everybody stays, then the amount of talent diversity goes down long term, right? It's okay for them to leave. That's fine. But when they leave, we want them to know about the opportunities that exist here and how they might be able to find a career when they're ready to bring their lifestyle back to Maine. Because when they leave, we know, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, they're going to want to come back. And when they want to come back, we want to make sure they have a path forward to do that. My colleague Ed McCursey has a saying that's like unfinished goods, right? Let's ship them out, let's let somebody else invest in their talent, and then let's let Maine benefit from that talent and that diversity later on. The third, boomerangs. So I'm going to speak to an example of this. Kim is a boomerang. So Kim grew up in Maine. I'm a boomerang. We grew up in Maine. Ed's not a boomerang, but no, he's a one-way boomerang. He ended up in Maine. That's okay. So a boomerang is somebody who started out in Maine, left Maine, and then came back to Maine. So I'm going to show you an example of how we're engaging that target audience in just a moment. And then the fourth is tourists. So again, 36 million people visit us every year. We don't have to try very hard to identify where those people are coming from. We've done some work down in the Kittery Visitor Center, for example. The restrooms at the Kittery Visitor Center are the most frequented tourist location in the state of Maine. And when you got to go in Maine. So we've had a combination of an iPad kiosk at the front desk when people are interested in learning more about Maine. They can get their roadmap. They can engage with our website, which has quality of life information. And then we've also done some guerrilla marketing work with some branding efforts inside the restrooms because you've got some time to spend when you're in there, right? So we got to get creative. But again, we don't have to wonder about where these people are. There's not a lot of work to identify them. There's never been a message presented to tourists until 2 years ago. Nobody presented a message to them that said, hey, while you're visiting our state, think about what it might be like to live here. We're a state of 1.25 million people. I don't do the math, 30-something times those number of people visit us, right? So why wouldn't we just start there? That's the lowest of the low fruit. Boomerangs. So next week, this is like, talking the talk, and now we're getting to walk the walk. So a week from Friday, every single Maine Today newspaper in the state of Maine, which covers the majority of the state now because of acquisitions, will have a sticker on the front of every paper with this message. This is not targeting people who are visiting. This is targeting people who are hosting people visiting. And I'll demonstrate, well, actually, we can just talk about it now. So on some tables, we brought some samples of swag packets. We used to call them swag bags, but it doesn't qualify as a bag anymore. We used LL Bean tote bags for a while, and they're very nice tote bags, but they're very expensive. We would have gone bankrupt overnight because Maine employers, like wherever Guy is, Dead River, took our offer of sending these swag bags to new employees who've relocated to Maine. They really ran with it. And so it turns out a lot of people are moving back to Maine to work for companies like Dead River and Maine Health and Bangor Savings and all the great employers that are represented in this room. So the good problem we face is that we needed to scale this up. So please don't open these bags. If you have already, you can feel a little bit guilty. But the purpose of these bags, we hope you will take it, and I'll show you what's in here. We hope you'll take this and mail it to someone who you know. It can be a relative. It's fine if you want to share in the swag. But somebody who's not here in Maine that could be. So, and it's really simple stuff. You'll see some coasters, and please take whatever you find on the tables that are at least branded with our stuff. I can't speak for the hotel. So Live and Work Maine coasters. We've got beer koozies or water bottle koozies, whatever you want. And then, but it's a beer koozie. And then some rack cards, and then a beautiful Live and Work Maine t-shirt. Again, simple stuff, right? So it's a matter of putting the message in front of people that Maine is here, Maine wants you, and when you're ready to bring your talent back and you want to seize that quality of life, there's a path for you to follow to take that. So you can write down this URL or you can grab your paper on Black Friday. So next week, Boomerang Engagement Week, we're calling it. We're going to rebrand the whole Thanksgiving week. No, just kidding. So Wednesday, before Thanksgiving, is the single biggest bar day and night in the United States in the whole year. When people go home, wherever home may be, and let's bring back that term in just a second. When they go home, they want to go out and prepare themselves for the inevitable dinner the next day. So we're distributing swag, and Lynn from Visit Portland is here, and the Chamber. We're working together to identify venues who are interested in having free stuff, coasters, t-shirts, stickers, whatever. It's a very simple message. There's no speaking involved. There's no pitch. There's none of that. It's just putting the message out there for people to self-select. So if you are interested in participating, if you represent a venue who wants some free stuff, come find me, Lynn, or Quincy. Probably me. They're looking at me like, no. I'll handle it. So there'll be about a dozen venues here in Portland, Bangor, Brunswick. We're hoping to find one up in Holton. So the point is just make sure that is visible and that is enabled. Okay, last example. Maine Outdoor Brand. So last week, hot off the after 5 hours of sleep after election night, got on a jet, went to Denver, Colorado for the Outdoor Retailers Association Winter Market, or whatever they called it. It's essentially all the national outdoor brand retailers get together and B2B represent their goods and sell their brands. The proposition here was with our partners at Maine Outdoor Brands, which is a new industry group that represents brands that leverage Maine's outdoor quality of life in their work. The premise and the thing we wanted to test was, can we all leverage the same benefit promise, which is Maine's quality of life is great, associated with the outdoors? Can we all leverage that together and benefit more than all individually having our own booths? Immediately, a lot of cost savings, a lot of small brands, Flowfold, Good to Go, Sea Bags, folks that may not have their own kiosk there could afford to participate in a larger kiosk that we all split the cost on. The takeaways, and you'll see on this image, the booth premise was Maine. It wasn't, buy bags, it wasn't buy food, it wasn't buy wallets. It was Maine. And when we engaged with folks we weren't even giving away the beer, and we had a full booth, we had this big map, and we had push pins, and we asked people to write down their name and put the push pin in on the state where they visited or where they wanted to go. And we didn't encourage anyone to go in any singular location. This was self-identified. Really cool takeaways. This picture was taken on day 2. There was another 2 days after this of push pins. So it was a really cool experience. We've got their contact information. You're darn right we're going to make sure that they know there are career opportunities in Maine. Okay. So why are we here? Because failure is not an option. It's a little hokey, but failure is not an option. I mean, why are we here? We're not here to do it, just to make a buck. We're not here to get free T-shirts, though we have those. We're here because we love Maine, and we're all doing this. You're all sitting in your chairs here in Maine. You all live and work in here full time because we love it. So starting from the premise of it's good enough is not good enough. So we take the attitude of failure is not an option. It's all hands on deck. There's no silver bullet. It takes partnerships. Let's get it done. We don't have time to waste. So what you can do, some takeaways, and then we'll pivot into Q&A because I'm sure that there are some avenues that you want to explore with us in particular. Internships. As Kim talked about, the Focus Maine internship experience managed by Educate Maine is a phenomenal opportunity because you've got a density of activity here in Portland. If you don't currently have an internship program, can I say talk to
Jason.
Talk to Jason. See, he said it, Jason, not me.
He's in the back, bro.
Where's Jason? Jason, he loves attention. So Jason would be happy to talk to you about internship program development. When you develop that internship program, we can help get the word out and get them involved in that cohort. It's a great opportunity for anyone, but it's a really easy opportunity here in Portland because of that density. The second, tap into the immigrant and refugee population. One of the competitive advantages that Portland has relative to other areas in the state is a density of population of immigrants and refugees. And there are services in the city that can help you tap into that talent pool. So this is not an egg you have to crack on your own. There are some really talented people here, living here, and are going to be citizens here that you can leverage for your workforce that are eager for a job. And the good news is you don't have to do it on your own. The city of Portland has some great resources to do that. Third, create on-ramps for Mainers not yet in the workforce. There are a lot of people underemployed and not employed. Educate Maine is another organization through Project Login, through other avenues. They've got a lot of experience in helping you identify populations you might be able to work with, to train, to retrain, to get them on board. The state has some great resources associated with apprenticeships. Again, this is a competitive advantage that Portland has because of density of activity. You've got access, you've got the ability, you've got the space, literally and figuratively, to manage something like this better than other regions could. Lastly, change the conversation. So this is the real purpose of swag. Swag is not just to make sure that everyone looks good in red, though you will look good in this red t-shirt. The purpose of swag is to contribute to helping to change the conversation. If I show up to someone's door and I knock on it and I say, hey, I'm selling vacuums. This really isn't the best vacuum out there. We could have done the head a little better. The handle is a little wonky, but would you be interested in buying? I mean, no. If we start out by saying, well, Maine's got a lot of problems, but we'd love to have you. I mean, we're all laughing, but that's what we do, right? So let's get over ourselves and let's start talking about the great quality of life we have. I mean, for gosh sakes, we're all complaining about the cold. Folks, remember 12 months ago, that was freaking cold. This is not cold. This is an opportunity. What's the opportunity? Ed and I were just talking. Sunday River got a foot of powder last night. That's the opportunity, right? So let's change our lens. Let's change our perspective. And if you have something positive that you love about Maine, say it. It's not just about not saying the negative. It's about being louder and prouder about what we've already got. Because if the positive, it's not like we're going to stop talking about the bad stuff. We're New Englanders. That's going to be part of our character. But the positive stuff has to be louder than the negative stuff. And right now the volume's on 0. So let's turn it up to 10.
Thank you, Nick.
Questions and conversation. Let's do it.
Just remind folks, thank you all.
Forgot to sit down.
Just want to remind everybody to please come up to the microphone. Just to kick it off, though, change in leadership in Augusta. Each one of your organizations work closely with folks in Augusta. Very briefly, are you looking for anything in specific? Start with Ed.
And I think the vote affirmed this, affirmed the public support of this. As we look at workforce and building a workforce, there is no conceivable future where the university system and community college system aren't leading the state's workforce solution. That's just mathematically impossible. So what we're looking forward to, and I think was a nice signal from the Maine voters, is to start investing in those institutions in a meaningful, strategic way to drive our workforce solutions. They've certainly done the work over the last several years about realignment, about efficiencies, about serving Maine people better. I think we need to continue with this momentum and continue that support of these critical workforce development institutions in our state.
Feel free or not, whichever.
Maybe just two quick things. One is this conversation, and how do we really all come together? What role can the state play in helping to galvanize this? The second piece is just around our strategy in the 3 sectors that I talked about. We're really excited in talking about how we've developed those strategies, why we've taken the focus we have on growth-oriented, export-oriented companies, and looking at where the opportunities are to really advance that body of work.
Two quick ones, one very specific. The Educational Opportunity Tax Credit, branded as Opportunity Maine, is, if you haven't seen the national press in the last month or two, we lit a spark, set off a bonfire of activity around that. It is the single best student debt relief program in the nation. It is most generous and most broad. It applies to anyone regardless of where you studied or what you studied. It needs to be simplified in order to make it billboardable, literally and figuratively. It is the most generous tax program if you can figure it out. And so that's our marketing problem. And so the good problem is that right now there's no cap. So if you're not familiar with the program, opportunitymaine.org, you can check it out. Anybody who graduated from 2016 year on, doesn't matter where you went to school, as long as you live and work in Maine and pay your student debt, the state will offset that on your state income tax. If you studied a STEM degree, the state will cut you a check. It's a refundable tax credit. My wife, Jamie, gets a check. I don't. I married her for a reason. No. It's a great program, and there's a lot of political will to improve that, so that's great. But we're starting from the position of strength. The second is, when you consider, some action is going to be taken on workforce development and workforce attraction at the legislative level. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a really successful, as it was alluded to before, we have a really successful business model, so to speak, on how to get people here. That's tourism. We know what it takes. We know how much money it should take-ish to get a certain result. So let's not overthink this. There are wheels in motion. There are bodies in motion. The state currently spends $100,000 per year on workforce attraction. The line item is $13 million for tourism. So if you expect $100,000 to get you $13 million worth, then go back to school, talk to Educate Maine about getting a math class in there. So it just doesn't work. So that we're optimistic that there's a recognition that the action will be taken. We're hopeful that action is not too original, shall we say.
So we have a question over here.
Hello. Hello? Oh.
Hello.
My name's Chelsea Stevens. I'm an undergraduate social work student at USM, graduating in May and applied for my master's. And I am one of the few of my classmates that plan to stay in the state of Maine. And we don't have to be sold on how wonderful it is because we all live here. But at the risk of sounding like a New Englander and complaining, no one has anywhere to live. We have a housing crisis and it's just too expensive. And that seems to be the thing that's driving my classmates out of the state. So are any of your agencies advocating for lower housing costs or more housing?
I'll take a whack at it. So it's housing specifically is not in our lane, so to speak. It is certainly, as you say, it's a very important piece of the puzzle. I mean, personally, my wife and I used to live in downtown Portland. We saved money by buying a house in Mid-Coast Maine. Went from renting to buying. I mean, it does not compute. So the good news is that Maine is a big state. It's a big, small state. There are a lot of pockets of opportunity. The challenge, of course, as you know and feel right now, the challenge is matching housing, location with a job. I'd say the opportunity here is that Maine employers desperately want talented people. So I haven't met an employer who has said they won't work with someone that they want to figure it out. I can't speak specifically to the social work industry, but remote work is becoming an increased interest, as well as businesses and employers looking at expanding, so to speak, geographic locations in order to accommodate where the talent can afford to live or wants to live. So what I would offer, and then Ed looks like he wants to chime in, is that Maine employers need talent. Maine employers want to work with talent, and so I think that's the opportunity for students in college right now, is to recognize that they're needed and they're wanted. That's a great position to be in, because you can set the standards for what you need.
I think it's an excellent point, and it definitely is a constraint. And I think we have only scratched the surface, if at all, in terms of solving that, and we'll be forced to do that. I'll give you one very small example of some creative thinking. USM is working with Portland area employers. So we think about that internship program we just talked about. So for us who live here year-round, we're talking about getting a young person to show up for a couple months, probably in the Portland area, and we know the rental market's tight and expensive, and for an internship wage, it might be out of reach. USM has looked at that Gorham campus and has provided very affordable housing for interns that are working at predominantly Portland area companies. And it's kind of that creative solution that I think we're going to need, of more businesses thinking with our communities and our different structures about how can we get at a solution for this. So we have a ways to go, but people are interested.
I think we have time for another question. Right over here.
Hi, my name's Sarah Hinman. I work for the University of Maine at Farmington, and I'm developing a system-wide financial literacy peer education program. Thanks, Ed, for talking to our students this summer. And so I'm just curious, again, as we talk about the opportunities that we have, and great conversation today about how businesses can work and how you guys are attracting people to Maine. But what is your outreach to the high school and college student population and talking to them about the great benefits of staying here and what's available to them if they do?
Well, I'll take a quick crack at it because we have an example right here in the room. Jobs for Maine's graduates, JMG is here. They have serving over 10,000 students in almost every district now. And broadly speaking, full-on student support from middle school through post-secondary. So we have groups who, and they are a great partner of all of us. And we work arm in arm with them. So innovative programs such as that, where they have made a point and a priority of reaching out to Maine businesses to bring that information starting in middle school to raise aspirations and to improve student success, is one great example. And as we look forward, how can we scale that up? How can we get more bang out of that great program as just one example? And we have destination occupation. Hi. Here's another example of how are we using technology to bring the employer into the classroom via videos and other experiences to inform that. So I think the sky's the limit on that, but we have creative people in this very room, cracking that nut.
Just to tie those two pieces together real quick, if you're thinking to yourselves, I got to create a program or I got to solve this myself, stop right there and take 2 or 3 minutes and just ask, one of us, Jason in the back, Catherine in the back. First question should be, is somebody else doing this? Odds are the answer is yes or almost yes. And so that's something we focus on a lot. Sorry to keep saying your brand, focus in Maine a lot about, is, it's in the name, is trying to connect the dots to make sure that wheels aren't being reinvented and resources aren't being wasted. So the good news is there's a lot of good work out there, and we can do our best to try to connect you to that.
Carl Loomis from Ballet for Me, Parking the Way It Should Be. And I have a suggestion for you. Who's the first person that most visitors meet when they come to Maine? It's the Uber driver. I pick up a lot of people from the airport, and getting your swag out, I know who's coming from Utah, I know who's coming from Oklahoma, I know who's coming from Massachusetts.
Sold.
So Uber driver handing out the swag would probably be a great idea.
How about a car wrap?
That sounds good.
We'll buy it.
Good idea.
I hope you can hear me. I'm Lori Southworth. I'm with the Susan Curtis Foundation Youth Development Program, but this is a little bit of an unrelated question. I got an earful the other day about the state of the trades in Maine, and I thought it was important to share the question. I haven't done any fact checking, so I apologize if there are any incorrect assumptions. But he shared emphatically that the trades in Maine are hurting. Some business owners in the automobile and home construction industries are finding it almost impossible to pay the competitive wages that qualified skilled employees can now demand in those fields. Some are having to close their doors due to the labor shortage. Meanwhile, guidance counselors in Maine are under pressure from many angles to direct students away from the trades. The construction trades program at SMCC is struggling because schools aren't referring students as often. What can or should be done to promote the trades as a career option to students and families from all walks of life in Maine so that the trades are viewed as an equally valid and valuable career choice, again, for students from all walks of life? And again, I apologize for any incorrect assumptions. Thank you.
Absolutely. So there's the workforce shortage is real across every sector. I think the pendulum has swung way towards the college is the only route piece, and at the detriment of trades. The reality is this is not a zero-sum game. We need college-educated people. The jobs are there for that. We need people with skilled trades. I'd say look at some of the assets for Portland. The PATHS program, run by Kevin Stilfen, is one of the best in the state in terms of doing the trades. What we can help them do is raise the awareness of the companies, some of which are in this room. I work with Dead River on our board. They have a hard time finding drivers and burner technicians, HVAC people, to the point where industry's taking it into their own hands to start training programs, working with community colleges, CTE programs to get this workforce challenge accepted. But I think it starts with all of us, and frankly, it starts with parents. We're all good at saying, hey, go to the trades. Trades are good. But when your kid comes up to you and asks you, I'd like to go a trade route rather than right to college, ask yourself what you're willing to do on that. We've seen an about face in many families. That's a tough decision. But the fact is, the trades are a rigorous education pathway. Most trade kids actually end up going to college, and they have a better success rate than a traditional academic route. They finish on time, and they earn while they learn. So we're talking kids coming out, starting at 40, accelerating to 60,000 a year. And if you talk to Chinbro, they'll get you up above that and traveling the country in no time. So I think we all can do a better job of elevating all education pathways and not at the detriment of others, because frankly, we need it all in this state at this point.
Final question over here.
Hi, my name is Susan Gaddy. I'm a vocational counselor, and I work with a lot of people in looking at encore careers. We have a huge, growing, aging population with lots of talent. I work with people in their 50s and 60s that are planning on working into their 70s. And it's very hard for them to get the attention of hiring managers to understand that their skills are transferable and that they will be working in the workforce. What are your organizations doing to tap into our resources that are right here and available and wanting to work, but 50 and over? I hear a lot of great things and opportunities for younger people. So just wondering what you've thought or considered about that.
Yeah, so our attitude is less about, so we don't filter down to young people at all. In fact, we're focused on raising awareness, period. So the great news, the challenge, Maine's workforce is aging. The opportunity, there are a lot of people who want to work, right? I mean, good gosh, it's like a basic math problem. So the opportunity there is to, again, alluding to how Ed framed this before, help connect the dots between folks such as yourself, right? So there's a huge, I'd love to meet you after this. We've got a short list of people that do what you do and that do it in other ways too, that connect people of all ages with careers that, encore career that they used to do or a new career that they've been retrained for. So the good news is that there's this huge ecosystem of people that are working in that. So employers, the good news is there are people that specialize in this. So if the answer is, I need good, talented people to do a job, there are plenty of answers to that question or to that need. And that's certainly one of them. So the good news is that folks such as yourself, thank you for what you do. It's certainly needed. It's going to be, you're on the front lines. You know it's going to be needed more in the future. The good news is that the dots are all there. And it's not, it's a basic game of tic-tac-toe here. It's not too many angles involved to connect all these together.
Any thought about internships for people in their 50s?
Yeah, it's a really great idea, and it's come up as we've gone through the first kind of review cycle from this year. How can we expand this both to older folks, to folks who aren't in college, folks who are taking a different pathway? So we're looking this year at whether or not there could be some models that we could test in that space. So I would love to talk to you about that.
Great, thank you.
I think part of it is getting the message to Maine employers that if we look in 10 years out, the biggest hunk of your workforce solution is actually already in the workforce. And that is by far the biggest number and contributor to the workforce. So it does, our workforce solution for the next decade at least needs to have a solution for older workers who want to continue to work or change into a career, and there's a lot of knowledge and skill set there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank Nate, Kim, and Ed for coming here today and sharing a little bit about what you do. Obviously, there's a great interest in the workforce community here. I want to also express that we're going to be making a donation to the Creative Portland in your name. If anybody has questions for either of Ed, Nate, or Kim, I think they'll be here for a short time afterwards. Live and work in Maine, Focus Maine, Educate Maine, and so we hopefully you found this informative. And thank you for coming here this morning.
Thank you.